So Nick Spencer's doing the Captain America, the Hail Hydra, a lot of nerd rage out there. Are you worried about that when you're writing Batman?
Yeah, I mean, but I've been sort of subjected to it before when we did. We announced 0 Year, for example, and people thought we were going to do a new origin that was going to rewrite Year One, which, I mean, we were, but it mostly had to do with the fact that the New 52 kind of erased the possibility, at that moment at least, for Year One to be the origin anymore, because Jim Gordon had changed, Selina had changed, Batgirl had changed. So we were one of the last holdouts that hadn't done a new origin for the 52 at that point. And now that we've done Rebirth, it all kind of gels into one thing. But anyway, the point is, that caused a lot of anger. Nothing like what Nick's facing, I guess, in that way. And I was just with him at 5 Points in New York. He's good. Yeah, my feeling is basically, I think I have a few thoughts on it, which is, one, you have to give the story time to play out. Meaning, like with Superior Spider-Man, I remember the same kind of vitriol. And I understand, like, the thing with the Captain America story is particular. I understand, like, there is a sensitivity to the idea of making him, a Hydra agent, when Hydra does historically have Nazi roots and all of that. Even though if they weren't initially Nazis, they're associated with Nazis. So I completely understand the sensitivity to it in terms of Jewish creators creating an Aryan-looking hero that's going to essentially be a warrior for the oppressed, and the difficulty or the problematic nature of making him someone that is now with Hydra. But what I'd say is, Nick is also someone who's an incredibly thoughtful and sensitive guy deep down. I think sometimes I understand also his and many creators I know that I'm friends with, sometimes the reaction is to also stick up for your story and fight. And I appreciate that about some creators. I'm more of the sort of like, I hear you, just wait it out, not argue online about that stuff. But I think it's great that he's passionate about the story. And I can tell you from what I've read and the stuff that I've seen, I think he has terrific plans with all of it. And I have a lot of faith in him as a writer and in that story. But what I'd say is, I understand both sides in the way that I feel like I get why people are, so worked up about it, and I think it's legitimate. At the same time, I think you have to also sort of wait, see how the story goes, and on top of that, I do think on the other hand, there can be a sensitivity from creators where, you get attacked, and we all get this in a way at times, where we'll get DM'd, or you don't see what we see, meaning you don't see, if somebody tags you and says something that, I hate you, I'm going to punch you in the face when I see you at a con, you don't see it because I don't retweet it, you know what I mean? Or they can even DM you half the time if your DMs are open and say, I hate you, I'm going to kill you, or whatever, those things. And it can really work you up, where you get very defensive, and you get in a posture where you're in a defensive crouch, and you're going to say, well, I'm sticking up for my story, and I'm going to fight you off, and I'm going to stick up to it. Or you can, roll with it in different ways. And I just think the bottom line, I think what I'm getting at is that I think it's a multifaceted thing, and I think it's simple. It's too reductive to be able to be like, well, that story is offensive, or Nick is being an asshole, or you should let the story just play out and all of you are being assholes. It's one of those things where I think comics is, the great thing about it is it's a place where we're all really passionate. It's something that we're all intensely invested in. And that's the takeaway in terms of the kind of energy you see online, both from the people that are extremely against the story, extremely pro the story, and Nick himself. But I do wish the discourse was better, is what I'm getting at. Meaning, I think there's a way on all of our parts, on the parts of creators like myself, and I fall for it, and I'm at fault, Nick, Marvel, DC, and fans as well, I think could do a lot better at sort of having a discussion about it, online, offline, publicly, privately, all of it, that sort of addresses some of the issues without getting so ridiculously, I think, pointed or personal, when there really are legitimate issues at the core of it. Meaning, I do think it's something worth talking about. Is it something that should be backed away from, or leaned into? A story like Secret Empire, those questions are things that we should discuss in the same way we should discuss issues of race and gender and all of those things. Like, I'm all for it all the time, but I think the problem is when the discourse breaks down and becomes all of us shouting at each other and yelling when we haven't read the story, or Nick yelling back if he, is in a defensive posture, and Marvel similarly, and all of it. And nobody in particular in that case, I think, is the person at fault. I think it's just become a bit of a tangle. And I can tell you, as somebody who's known Nick, we're not super close, but I've known him at least in a friendly way. We've been friends since we started, when he did Morning Glories and I was doing American Vampire, and he cares deeply about doing right by these characters and doing right by the fans, and I know Marvel does as well, and they're not out to kick you in the balls and offend you and that stuff. That's not what they're trying to do, or what he's trying to do. He's deeply invested in a counter argument to some of the stuff I think he sees right now going on politically, going on culturally, and whether or not that always comes across immediately in the story, I think, is part of serialized comics and part of a question of waiting it out, seeing how it plays out, if it's effective, it's not effective. But I have a lot of faith in him, both as a creator and as a person, and so that is a long answer, which basically boils down to, I think we need a better way of talking to each other about it, ultimately, because it becomes, when it devolves into, people threatening or people hatefully, coming at creators, and creators also doing the same thing back, not just Nick, doing that, because Nick has also been, I think, has had responses that are also thoughtful and sensitive and all those things too. I'm not trying to say that that's what he does, but that we do that. I've done it. We've all done it at times too, where you knee-jerk want to fight back sometimes as well. But when it devolves to that, it just, nobody gets anywhere, and the things that we're trying to talk about get lost in the back and forth. So I hope that makes sense as an answer to all of that. But I really do. I mean, I think what it comes down to is it's a sign of health in the way that we're all passionate about the characters. We're passionate about what we want them to mean. We're passionate about what we don't want them to mean, and we just have to find a better way of sort of addressing it with each other. And I think there's plenty of fault, on all of us to kind of be laid.